configuring Windows deployment services for a simple deployment of Windows 10 in a Windows Server 2022 network. So far, we've set up on the server Active Directory domain services, DHCP, DNS, which comes with ADDS, and the file and storage services role was already installed when we started the server. And not to worry about this little red thing here, this is just an Edge update glitch, so it's not causing us any drama in the rest of the network. So the other thing to verify is, let's just check our IP configuration. So I've disabled the NIC teaming. I've turned off NIC teaming, and we're back to just running this 10.10.10.1 adapter, and we have our NAT adapter over here, which gives us internet access. This is the IP address of the Active Directory domain controller. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Manage and Add Roles and Features, and then we're going to choose the server, and we're going to choose to add the Windows Deployment Services role. And then if we click Next and just follow through the wizard, we can accept most of the defaults. Now, it's telling us that some things to note. The deployment server requires DHCP and DNS, so lucky we've got those both set up in the background here. Okay. We also need a transport server role as well. So when we click Next, you'll see that there's a deployment server and a transport server role. And then if we just confirm the installation, and we're going to tick this to restart the server if required whilst the installation is taking place, and then just click Install, and the installation will begin. So now that the Windows Deployment Services role has been installed, we can just close the Add Roles and Features wizard, and if we go to the dashboard in the server, we should see that we now have this WDS tile that's been added to our dashboard. So the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to go in to WDS, the management console, and we can do that by going to Tools and just clicking on Windows Deployment Services. And this is the same Microsoft Management Console as we have seen with DHCP, with DNS. So opening out the server here and clicking on it, we see we've got this little amber triangle, and it says Windows Deployment Services is not configured. So let's right click on Windows Deployment Services and click Configure Server. Okay, and it's going to bring up a configuration wizard. Now it's warning us once again that we can't do this unless we have ADDS, DHCP, DNS and an NTFS partition, of which we have all of those. So it's just telling us that we need those before we can begin. So
Peter, how did you enter that again to the tools?
I just right clicked here and went Configure Server.
The deployment services, the whole.
Oh, Tools, Windows Deployment Services. So, we want to have this integrated with the Active Directory. So we're going to choose Integrated with Active Directory, and then just leave the path. Now this path, this remote install path, is where we're going to keep our images that we're going to send over the network. Now, often we would have this on a different server. However, since we're setting this up in a lab environment for testing, we'll just run it on C. And it's going to give us an error about this in a minute. It's going to complain and say, like, it's not a good idea to keep your images on the same server. You know, you should put it on a separate volume. But we're going to ignore that advice and proceed anyway and keep it on the C drive. we can leave these as default. And interestingly enough, I showed you some DHCP options, like how to send out the DNS server using the DHCP options flags. We're also going to say to configure the DHCP options as well. So just leave those enabled. And we're going to say, right, it wouldn't be a very good deployment server if we said don't respond to any client computers. So we do. We want to respond to client computers known and unknown. And to make our lives easier, we don't actually want to approve it either. So let's respond to everyone and not have to do any approvals. Okay, and then Windows deployment services will go ahead and configure itself. Right, don't worry about this error if it comes up. It's just to do with VMware. So now that we have Windows deployment services initial configuration set up, there is still a little black, it's very small, very difficult to see, but there's a tiny little black stop symbol there. And what we actually need to do to start Windows deployment services is to actually right click on that and click start. And then that'll change into a little green play button. Quite difficult to see really. Now, inside of the Windows deployment services role are these different images, image stores we'll call them, image folders. So the first thing that we need to start deploying is we need a boot image. So if we go into the boot images folder and right click, we can just click add boot image. Okay, and the boot image we're going to add can be found on the Windows 10 DVD, the Windows 10 ISO. So before we do this, we need to go to our VM settings and make sure that in the CD DVD drive we have the Windows 10 ISO. Okay, we don't want the Windows Server ISO, we want the Windows 10 ISO, and we can double check that by going to the file manager on the server, going to this PC, going to the DVD drive. The DVD should be in there. If I double click, oh, look at that, application not found. We're about to run into problems, so let's just see what happens then. Maybe I need to go to VM, removable devices, and connect the DVD. Cannot connect CD-ROM, could not, failed to connect to the virtual device SATA 01. Okay, I've seen this happen before. So let's go settings, CD drive, and let's just tick connected, save. Specified path is invalid or does not exist. Oh, okay. Let's just choose this path again. Connected, save. See if that fixes it. Ah, there we go. That's fixed it. There's no significant difference between the in the chat. There's no significant difference between Windows 10 and Server 2016 boot IMG. I don't think so. Windows pre-execution environment's fairly straightforward. I don't think there is, but I'm not an expert in this. We'd have to get them both images and do a do a hash on them and see if they're the same file. Okay, so that's probably an experiment for another day. If we were to get the boot.wim from Windows Server 2016 and the boot.wim from Windows 10 and run a hash sum on them and see if it's the same file. It's definitely a good question for another day.
I've got the ISO files, but it's not showing up because I've got them in a folder called Server Administration, but how did you actually make that show up there again?
So I went to VM and I went to removable devices, and inside the CD DVD drive I went to settings there, and in the CD DVD drive I browsed to the ISO image. So there's my Windows 10 ISO, and just make sure these two ticky boxes are ticked, connected and connected at power on, and then you'll see that we have basically we've walked over to the computer and we've put the DVD into the virtual DVD drive in VMware. So this server thinks that it has a Windows 10 DVD in its DVD drive, its virtual DVD. I mean, everything's done virtually these days, really.
Because since it's on the server, because I've got a server ISO and a Windows 10 ISO.
Yeah, you want the Windows 10 ISO.
So that, but that won't mess up the server, no?
No, not putting a Windows 10 ISO into the DVD drive won't do any damage to the server. Because we're going to deploy Windows 10 to a client. Yes, the server's installed. Yes, exactly. Don't run it and click on it and try and install it or anything. Just put it in the DVD drive, right? So, now what we can do in Windows Deployment Services is we can now pull the boot.wim file off of that DVD. So to do that, we're going to do add boot image, and it's going to say, where is your Windows 10 boot image? And I'm going to say, browse to the DVD drive. And inside this ISO, we have to go into the sources folder, and right down the bottom there, you'll see it, there it is, boot.wim. So it's in the ISO, the boot.wim file, okay? And then click open, and this will be probably quite quick. It won't take very long because it's a very small file. So that the path to that there is d sources and boot.wim is in the sources folder. So we'll leave this just called Windows Setup. We can change the name later, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change it to Windows 10 Setup so that we know that we're dealing with a Windows 10 boot.wim. Otherwise we're going to end up with 100 different images all called Windows 64 Setup. So just accept the defaults on that once we've named it, and then what VMware will do, what Windows Server will do, is it will extract the boot.wim file and add it into our image store here. So it'll appear here, Windows 10 Setup. So that's the first thing we need, and we need that to run Windows pre-execution environment. The next step is to get the install.wim, and we're going to do that in exactly the same way. Right click, add install image. Slightly different because it asks you to create a group, but we just accept image group 1. And then exactly the same workflow, browse to the DVD and choose install.wim from the sources folder. And then if we click next, now your ISO might be a little bit different from mine, but these are all the different install.wims that are on that DVD. And what I'm going to do is untick them all because I don't want to add 10 different install.wims, and I just want to add Windows 10 Pro. Okay, it's the only one I want to add. Now yours might look a little bit different from this. If you only have Pro N, that's fine. You just add Pro N if you've only got Pro N. N's good. N just means, I think, without Windows Media Player, I believe. Something to do with Scandinavia. So if you only have Windows 10 Pro N, just add Pro N. I'm going to add just Windows 10 Pro Basic. And then we just click next, and this will probably take a little bit longer because how did I get to that? I went to install images, and inside install images I right clicked and I clicked add install image. Okay, same way we did with the boot image. So the install image will take a little bit longer because it's a bigger file. Okay, it'll run in the background for quite a bit to copy that file off the DVD. It's a big file, the install.wim. So while that's copying over in the background, what we need now is we need a machine to try to send these images to. Let's just have a look. There's some errors coming up in the chat here. The file does not contain a valid boot image. That's because you are trying to add the install.wim into the boot.wim folder, and you've got the wrong file there. You want to add boot.wim in there. I can see you've got boot images highlighted. So click OK, browse and choose boot.wim, and then click next, and it'll work. And then when you add your install.wim image, you want to choose install.wim into there. Okay, so it won't accept an install.wim into the boot images store and vice versa. They won't work. It'll just give you an error. So while that's installing, and while people are having various degrees of drama in the background, I'm going to create a blank virtual machine to send this new image to while it's setting up in the background. So I'm just going to go File, New Virtual Machine, and the new virtual machine wizard will pop up. Okay, so for the new virtual machine, we're going to set up a virtual machine with nothing on it. No operating system or anything. Just imagine this as being a blank computer that sits over in the it's sitting in a room somewhere. So let's do a custom image, and we'll just leave this as default. And I'm going to choose I will install the operating system later, because we're going to install the operating system using Windows deployment services, not using an ISO or a physical drive. So I will install the operating system later is the key thing to choose. And then choose Windows 10 64-bit for the version. And I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call it WDS test client. So we know that this is just our, I think I ran out of characters there. WDS test client, there we go. WDS test client. The name doesn't really matter that much, but this is just so we know it's different from our Windows 10 client machine that I have over here. So now to keep things simple, I'm going to put it on BIOS, not UEFI, although I believe we're going to be forced to use UEFI with Windows 11. And then I'm just going to accept the defaults for everything else. Now, it's not going to let me assign the network adapter to the LAN segment in the virtual machine wizard, so leave it on that, and I'll show you how to change that at the end. Let's just accept all of these and store the disk as a single file, just makes it easier to delete later. Right, so when we get to the end, we're going to do customize hardware, and we're going to put this test client on the LAN segment where our Windows Deployment Services server actually lives. Yes, make the test client as well. It's just a blank virtual machine. The only important thing about the test client is that it's on the same network segment, the same LAN segment or VMnet as the deployment server, because obviously it needs to get an IP address, it needs to get DNS from the Active Directory. So let me just close this off here, because we've put it onto the LAN segment, and that's us finished with this blank virtual machine, and it's sitting there. I'm going to drag it into my server admin folder here, so we have them all in the same folder. So we've got our server here, we've got our Windows 10 client that we're not going to use today, that's just sitting in an off state, and we've now got this new blank virtual machine that's just sitting on the LAN segment with no operating system. I will install the operating system later. It's just sitting, it's an empty shell, this machine. So finally the install.wim has added, and if I click finish here, we'll see that we now have an install.wim image sitting there, and we also have a boot image sitting in the boot image store. So there's a couple of configurations that we're going to do just to optimize this, and I'll put these into the chat, and those are, when we right click on our server and go to properties, it takes us into this properties configuration setup, and the two settings we're going to do, I'm going to put this into the chat, right, are we're going to configure the TFTP block size, and we're going to make it 16384. Okay, it's just a multiple of 4096. So let me just pop that in the chat. So TFTP block size 16384. Let's just pop that in there in case anyone wants to know. Apply that, And we're also going to go to the Pxe Response. That's fine. Just going to check for the boot tab is where we want to enable this. So we don't want to require the user to have to press the F12 key to continue. So we're going to choose always continue the PXE boot, and for unknown clients as well, always. And this is where we could add some other options, but I just want to say always continue, because if you make it require to press the F12 key, you have to be quite quick to the draw to hit F12 before it times out. So let's apply that as well. So I'll put that in the chat as well. Boot always continue the PXE boot. Okay. Now, if we also wanted to set up the multicast engine in here, we would do that in here as well. I'm just going to check that there's no other settings that I need to enable. There's where we would add our answer file as well. But those two settings are absolutely fine. I just wanted to put those. So the TFT block size, and make sure that in boot we've got always continue the PXE boot. Just enable that. So that's it. That's Windows Deployment Services ready to go. We can now send this image over the network. Okay, now I've had this working with various degrees of success. So let me just start up our blank machine here. And our blank machine should be able to see the deployment server. Okay, so what I'm going to do when I start it, okay, this is just a little fun part of doing this with VMware. When you start it, you have to click into the machine and press F12. Sometimes you have to do it 2 or 3 times. So what I normally do is do like start, click F12, click F12. Right, watch, you'll see me doing it. So start, click F12, click F12, click F12, click F12, F12. Here we go. So that's worked now. So what it's doing now is it's getting the a file from the Windows Deployment Services server. It's getting, it tells you there, it's getting boot.wim. It's pulling boot.wim down onto the machine. So what this is going to do is this is going to start Windows pre-execution environment on this blank machine, and that's going to allow us to add to choose an install image to go onto this blank machine. Once the boot.wim image has loaded onto the target machine, the client machine, Windows setup will then start, and this is Windows PE. This is Windows pre-execution environment. So kind of important to change the keyboard language to the United Kingdom, just in case we have any special characters in our keyboard language, in our password, sorry. Because the worst thing that you can do is, let's say you have a $sign or an @ symbol or something in the password, and you forget to set the keyboard language. On an American keyboard or an international keyboard, we know for a fact that the @ symbol is usually above the 2, whereas on a British keyboard the @ symbol is like 2 keys along from L. So if you end up with the wrong keyboard language, you could end up in a very bad place. So we can leave the locale on United States, but we should probably set this keyboard language to United Kingdom, just in case. Now, what's going to happen now is we're going to get a password prompt. And what we need to do is we need to log in to the domain controller. So our domain is ec.sa.com. Okay, and then it's telling us how to do it up here. Look, domain/user. So we do /administrator. Okay, and then we're just going to put the password in, and of course, if we've got any symbols in the password, we'll see why it was important to set it to UK. So, and let's just click OK on that. Right, now this next window, this Windows 10 Pro is, back on the server, is this Windows 10 Pro. That's that image inside the image store. Okay, so if we go to our client, that's telling us what install.wim. Now we could have like a special one for technical support. We could have maybe a Windows 7, a Windows, I'm guessing soon a Windows 11. So we could have multiple in there, but if you remember in the previous step, I unticked a lot of options because I didn't want us to have loads of install.wims in there. So if I click next, that's it, right? Next, it'll ask me about the disk. Just leave it on the full disk, and that's it. Now we're doing a Windows installation, and we're doing it over the network. So we're not using the ISO, we're using the deployment server to do the Windows installation. Now, all of us have installed Windows multiple times, so there's no need for this to continue. Okay, all this is going to do is give us a Windows 10 installation. This is just a proof of concept. So now that we have this working, what I'm actually going to do is just kill the machine. Okay, power, shut down guest, and we'll just cancel the installation at this stage. Now, let us just say that if I were to go set this machine up and add a lot of software, I might want to then send that image back to the deployment server. Okay, and at the moment we can't do that. Okay, because we need a little bit more configuration before we can send images to the deployment server. So at the moment we can get images from the deployment server, but that's working right now. But now we need to figure out the other way. Can we send an image to the deployment server? So let's kill this just now. Shut down guest. We'll give up on that because we know that that's working now. And let's go back to the server and let's prepare the server to receive images. Now, the way we're going to do this is we need to go and set up a special type of Windows pre-execution environment. And that special type is called a capture image. A special type of image called a capture image. And to do that, we just go into boot images and right click, and if we right click on our current image, it's going to say create capture image. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our current Windows pre-execution environment boot image, and we're going to use that to create a special type of image, a capture image that allows us to receive an operating system through Windows deployment services. So now there's one part of this that's quite confusing, and that one part, I'll show you in a second, is this window here. I've always found this slightly backward. So I'm going to write after here on the image name capture. So we know this is the capture image, okay? So let's put capture here. Now you would think at this point that we want to go and browse to the CD again and choose the boot image because we're making a special boot image. But no. This is asking us where to save the capture image. Okay, this is not asking us where the boot image is, which is what I do and I end up going round in a circle. I've done this multiple times. I find this very confusing. Okay, so this is actually asking us for a location to save this new image. So it doesn't matter, you could save it in the documents folder if you wanted to, but to keep things sensible, I'm going to browse into the file system. I'm going to choose not the DVD drive. We don't want to save our capture image on the DVD drive. I'm going to go into the local disk C, and inside the remote install folder, okay, I could go into images, but I'm happy to just leave it at the parent directory here, okay? So I'm just going to call this capture. Click open. And you can see it's now going to create I'll put this path into the chat. It's now going to create a capture image in that path. Now, Personally, I find this to be quite confusing, because you would think that that's telling you where to go and get the boot image, and you would go, oh, browse, go to the DVD, go to sources, there's the boot image. But no, it's asking you where it wants to save this new image it's going to create, this new capture image. So apart from that, everything else is straightforward here. Let's just go next. And then it's going to take the current boot image and it's going to convert it into a special type of image called a capture image. Okay, so this will not take long. It's quite a small file. But what this is going to result in is it's going to mean that we're going to have two boot images to choose from when we boot the target, the WDS test client. It's going to now give us a choice of which version of Windows pre-execution environment we want to run on the client machine. Once the operation is complete, remember to tick, I don't know why anybody wouldn't tick this box, but tick the box to add the image to the deployment server. Obviously, if you didn't tick that box, it would be an entirely an entirely futile effort. So let's do that. And then click next and save it as Windows 10 capture. Next. And it's going to add that to the deployment server. So I suppose the first wizard was it creating the capture image, and this second phase is adding the capture image. It doesn't take as long, this bit. Finish. Right, so now we have two versions of Windows pre-execution environment, two boot images. We've got our standard boot image, which will allow us to pull the operating system, and we've got our capture image, which will allow us to push an operating system in the direction of the server. And yes, it does take a while to create these. Interestingly, the expanded size seems to be 1793 meg on them both, but I don't know, I'm guessing if we did a MD5 hash on them or something to compare, I'm guessing they would be different. It'd be funny if they were just the same. Just made you do this for no reason. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go to our test client over here and start her up again and click F12 to get back into the bootloader, and you'll now see that we have two different boot images. Okay, so what I would like us to do this week, okay, is I just pressed escape there to cancel that, okay? What I would like us to do is just rename this. Once it's installed, it'll be easy to rename it. Just rename this, like, where are we? Properties, capture, Michael. Pop my name after it so we know it's mine. Apply that. And then go over to the server, the test client. Let's do Control-Delete to restart. Click on F12, and there we have the capture image with Michael in it there. So what I'm going to do is grab a screenshot of that, capture screen. Okay, and that's just the stage I would like everyone to get to this week, and just upload that to the Moodle once you've got that working, and that's us ready to go for part 2 of Windows deployment services, where we're going to try and send an operating system to the deployment server as opposed to taking it back from the deployment server.